If there's 2 words you can use to describe 2021, it's unending depression. If 2 words you can use that aren't so crushing, it's Cartoon Network. I've spent pretty much the entire year watching shows from them. Originally I wanted to do a video ranking all of them, but then I realized they had like 100 shows, and I realized I do actually have a life outside of watching children's cartoons. But I don't want that time to go to waste. I'll probably make a standard top 30 or something, and I'll definitely talk about some of the other shows in different videos. But of all the shows, there's one that really stood out, and that I had to drop everything to talk about. That show was Adventure Time. That video is really good. Please watch that video. It's one of my favorites. Courage the Dog is also pretty good. Seriously though, while I did remember liking the show when I was a kid, I was never super into it. After a rewatch, this is now my 3rd favorite CN show. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Now, granted, I'm sure most of you are at least familiar with the show. If not, as explained in the intro that I would play if it was as Carly as the main character and don't want a copyright strike. Courage is an easily scared dog who lives with the Bags family, including the kindly old woman Muriel and her cranky husband Eustace. We live in the middle of nowhere, where monsters constantly come in and try to attack the farm in some way, encouraging to face his fears and protect the farm. Now, Courage is by no means an obscure show, but I don't think anyone ever really talked about it in depth. The show has, no exaggeration, some of the greatest, most clever, subtle, and deepest moments in whole episodes I've seen and never picked up on as a child. I don't think it's a surprise that no one ever talks about this though, because if you ever talk about anyone with this show, this is how it will usually go. Hey bro, you want to talk about a 2-decade-old cartoon show? Yeah, dude, I love talking about old children's shows. You remember Courage Carly the Dog? Yeah bro, I love Courage though. Yeah, most people only talk about this show being how scary it was. And don't get me wrong, it's definitely part of that, but there's so much more here. Stupid internet, you're making this show look bad. That's it, I'm getting me a mallet. This is why Courage Carly Dog is amazing. Yes, no, this isn't the right color. Shut up, I'm on a budget. No, but seriously, Ramsey still scares me. Don't talk about him. This is official art. Looks like Courage just buried a body. And you're next. So before we dive deep into the middle of nowhere, let's set up a bit. Courage is of course the main character, and his name really tells you all you need to know. He's a dog, and he's cowardly. He loves Muriel. Clearly he wants nothing more than just to sit on her lap on her rocking chair. Courage is more than just his name though. It's been pointed out both online and in the show itself that Courage's name isn't ironic. Courage isn't just being fearless. It's understanding something is dangerous or scary, but facing it despite that. Courage never grows past his fears, but it's not negative continuity, that's normal. He put his crippling fears to the side to help who he cares about. In the earlier episodes of the show, Courage would frequently talk soulful sentences, though as the show went on he started exclusively talking in grunts, screams, short words, whatever this is. Growing up, despite being terrified of my own shadow, I watched the show a lot because it was kind of a coping method. Seeing someone literally called the Cowardly Dog being able to face his literal demons really helped inspire me to do the same thing. Granted, my fears with the darkened spiders are not zombie directors and sisters that tune me into a quilt, but to each their own. I think the main standout here is that Courage doesn't usually try to beat his opponents, but instead redeem them. In an early episode, a living shadow comes in and causes a ruckus. Courage reasons with him, and we find out that he wants to be a movie star, which Courage helps him with. Kinda. In another episode, a pair of ducks come in and remote control Muriel. They do this because they naturally need to control her so they can rescue their kidnapped brother from a chef. Naturally, I mean, I don't need to explain this, like, come on. This was the obvious conclusion. Courage offers himself up to get their brother, and so on. I'll give more examples later. Though fun fact, since I brought them up, it's a common misconception that the Duck brothers are voiced by Ringo Starr from the Beatles, but they're actually voiced by Will Ryan, one of the former voice actors of Pete, and who recently passed away recently. Muriel is one of the simplest characters in fiction. That's really all she needs to be. She's just the kindest woman you'll ever meet, and it never really feels forced or that she's too oblivious. It always feels genuine. She's always a warm presence that, even when faces adversity, Muriel is just one of the most instantly lovable characters out there. And the outcry of support and love of her character when her voice actor Theo White passed can attest to this. Then there's Eustace. He's one of the most divisive characters ever, really. It's not hard to see why. He's abusive, cruel, kind of sexist, arguably a murderer, animal abuser. I'm starting to realize I should have cosplayed Muriel. Okay, he's bad, but the show knows it. If Eustace ever acts particularly cruel in an episode, he'll either be called out on his actions, punished, or both. And he isn't all sour. He has more than a fair amount of moments when he's genuinely nice or caring. It's also understandable, as the show shows, that he's like this because that's how his own mother treated him. That, and I think he's funny. I don't know what that says about me. So, any other notable characters? No. I'll talk about a few of the villains later, but let's move on to the next section. So I'm not an artist. I'll never be an artist. But I do admire good art when I see it. And Courage, well, I wouldn't say it's the greatest art style ever, but it does really stand out. The colors just pop. There's two modes here. The standard, more flat, but normal color scheme and style that's seen in places like the house or the diner. But when things get dark, the color changes to a more neon palette, and it's very striking. The character designs are all so unique. It's hard to explain, but if you showed me a silhouette of any character in the show, I'd be able to tell you who it is. That's Shirley, that's Shrek, that's Queen of the Black Puddle, and that's... The most notable part of the animation is that they mix media a lot. That's very common nowadays. In the 90s and early 2000s, not as much. It really helps with the horror of the show, which explains why the mixed animation contains some of the most memorable moments of the show, like with Perfect Monster, The Violin Girl, and He Who Should Not Be Named. I also lumped in the show's writing here, for some reason, even though it's completely separate. The show is pitched as a horror satire, and that's a very good description. Despite how far some of the monsters may go, the show never forgets to have the funny ha-has. It can really catch you off guard, which really just helps it be so much more funny. I really need to stop talking about jokes in these reviews because they just boil down to if funny. There's more to be said about the show's writing from a non-comedic perspective, but for now, I think we should move on to the reason most people remember this show. Cartoon Network's villains don't get enough love. Like, they have some of the most twisted and evil villains I've ever seen in any children's media. Like, we got the Lich, who aims to wipe out all of humanity and looks like this. Both Vilgax and Anti-Pop successfully murdered near infinite amount of people. The Beast manipulates people into feeling hopeless so he can turn them into trees. Powerpuff Girls literally has a devil as a major opponent, and he's not even the worst character. There was a literal dick who murdered the entire Powerpuff Girls. Who took over the entire world? No one's seen Victor and Valentino, but Chip kidnaps people and turns them into dolls out of greed. Chris McClane has a list of crimes longer than the amount of times I've stuttered. But Courage stands out, both in terms of the villain's memorability and their heinousness. Let's start small. Snowman's fun. He's for some reason a Sean Connery Bond parody, but he's actually a bit of a tragic character almost. So his whole goal is to save his species from global warming, which would help with Courage to get his friends back, thanks to Courage sewing the ozone layer together. You are literally out of your mind if you don't think Courage could be Goku. A lot of characters either seem worse than they really are or get redeemed. A good example of the first one is Gene Bob, a pig who works at a diner. Don't question it. Who seems to be a cannibal, considering the show wouldn't be a surprise, but it turns out he and his wife actually just make meat sculptures of guests. Fun fact, by the way, he's voiced by the voice acting legend Jim Cummings, who voices a lot of characters in the show, and is also, of course, the voice of my man Pete. I get stronger every time the Dark Lord's name is uttered. The Quack is a fun character. He's the second most recurring villain, and he's basically just a thief and a con artist. He's not scary or deep, he's just fun. He's actually based on the famous book character Arsène Lupin. I don't care if I mispronounced that. It has a lot of different characters based on him, actually. Someone should, make a video ranking all of them. Okay, enough of the small fry. Let's get to what you really came here for. Ben Tarantella is a serial killer zombie. In the show, they claim that he and his partner slayed 12 people. And that alone is interesting, since even modern shows don't use the word kill. And slay is just worse. They also try to eat Muriel alive, which is very fun. Fusili turns people into mindless puppets and plays with their corpses. Never smile at the crocodile, I guess. Also, fun fact, both Muriel and Eustace die in this episode. It's not switched back as the episode ends. And the episode ends with Courage playing with their corpses. This was originally planned to be the series finale before it was picked up for a second season. Jesus Christ. The Stitch Sisters lure women into their clubs, but then seal them away in their quilt to extend their life. They're actually really similar to the Beast now that I think about it. The Queen of the Black Puddle is basically a siren, but even more twisted, since she actually hunts down men, seduces them, then eats them. It's worth noting that all these guys, besides Stitch Sisters, have an impressive kill count. That sounds so wrong out of context. Don't murder people, anyone. Unless it's fun, I don't know. As they all have at least a dozen kills under their belt / coat / cape. But obviously I missed the main villain, Katz, and he's even worse than the others. He is legitimately a serial killer played completely straight in a kid's show, unlike Benton, who has some comedic moments. In his first episode, Cat's Motel, it's revealed that every person who enters the motel, he feeds to his giant spiders. In the next appearance, he turns people into objects and forces them to fight for death for his own amusement. In Cat's Candy, Katz loses to Muriel in a baking competition. He responds by trying to bake her alive! Jesus! In Cat's in the Sea, he tries to get rid of a business rival blowing up her submarine. When that doesn't work, he blows up his own sub with people on it as he escapes. Though everyone does get off safely, and Katz gets eaten by a shark. Katz is legit sadistic. as whenever he has Courage cornered, he'll extend his suffering by forcing him to play a game. He also only does what he does for his own amusement, or just because he's petty, like in the Cat's Candy episode. Cat's is legit one of the most evil characters in not just CN, but animation in general, and it's one of the greatest villains in cartoons, period. Yes, I did put him bottom A in my cartoon villains tier list. Frick you, that video is outdated. Now, there's 4 more notable characters to talk about, but I want to save their episode for later. And that's it. Those are all the notable villains. Alright. Let's finally address the elephant in the room. I talked about King Ramses in my video on Scary Moments from my childhood, and that still holds. I will say though, I'm not scared of him anymore. This is the episode everyone talks about. It's the most memed. If anyone mentioned Courage, they're required to bring this up. I'm numb to it. That being said, have you seen this episode recently? It's absolutely hilarious. One of the plays is just bad music. Courage and Eustace are at their best, and when Courage destroys the machine making music, this happens.
Oh, come on.
How could you not love this? Don't get me wrong, I don't blame Past Me or anyone else scared of this episode, but now, it's just hilarious. Facing your fear with courage, both literally and metaphorically. That sounds like being tied back to the show. Speaking of which... Okay, this is the main segment of this video. Courage is mostly just boiled down to that one show that gave me night trauma, but it is one of the most clever, funny, smart, subtlest, deepest, healthiest shows I have ever seen in my life. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'm going to break down as many episodes as I could think of that really deserve the spotlight. Let's strap in. Let's talk about the 4 episodes I brought up before. Freaky Fred is one I'm a bit mixed with. I mean, I enjoy the episode. Fred is a memorable antagonist, and it manages to be the scariest episode despite not much happening. But this is a show where you can't take things at face value. And when you do that, this episode gets uncomfortable real fast. Though I'll admit, it might just be me. I remember like over a decade, I heard the theory this episode is actually about actually, brief rundown. Muriel's cousin Fred comes over for a visit. Fred's a barber who's obsessed with his work. Eventually, he and Courage get locked in the bathroom, where we get his backstory. How he was always obsessed with shaving. He shaved his hamster than a girl. I think you can see where this is going, since he shaves Courage without his consent. I'm not looking far into this, right? Fred's a predator, right? Considering his backstory, Courage's reaction, and the show's rating, yeah, I think it's clear why I and so many others think this is more than just a dog getting his haircut. This is one of the few episodes where Courage technically loses, which really explains why I'm so uncomfortable with it. Actually, I want to come back and say, the more I think about this episode, though, the more I think it's actually much better than I give credit for. Like, I still like the episode, despite feeling kind of off about it. But, like, the main thing Courage does, like, he tries to hide his behind. That sounds wrong, but that's what's happening. So, you could interpret this as, but maybe it isn't, like, him losing. It is him fighting back against what is basically a child predator, as close as you can get to one of the kids show. So, yeah, this actually is a deeper episode than even I thought it was. So, yeah, that's really all I need to say. This is an even better episode than I first thought. And I still like the episode, despite feeling a bit weird about it at first. So, I love this show. Not about that one extremely uncomfortable subject, though. Let's talk about several. But this time, no bad feelings. The Mask is a phenomenal episode. I'll walk through it and point out all the notable parts and meanings. This episode starts with a new character being Courage an absolute frick up. Courage is like the most unlucky character in fiction. New character, later revealed to be Kitty, hates Courage because he's a dog. Courage also is later revealed to be scared of her because she's a cat, as his only experiences with them is the previously mentioned cats. So basically, this episode deals with prejudice. I've seen some people compare it to sexism, but it doesn't entirely fit. Racism fits a bit better since Kitty and Courage are falsely accusing each other as a species of doing something bad based on a completely separate person. The reason Kitty is so bitter is because of her friend, Bunny, these are super creative names I know, is currently basically locked up by her abusive boyfriend Mad Dog. It's a surprisingly realistic portrayal of domestic abuse in a kid's show. Courage, upon finding this out, goes to save Bunny, who is understandably also prejudiced against dogs, but the two manage to escape Mad Dog and reunite with Kitty. And I gotta mention it, Mad Dog says he doesn't want to see Kitty near Bunny at all. Another character says Mad Dog didn't like how friendly the two were. And just a general feel, it's highly speculated that these two are a couple, which isn't something you saw in children's animations pre the 2010s. It's thankfully gotten a lot more attention nowadays, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, you would never see this. So Courage really breaking some boundaries here. Power of Dr. Zalos is really interesting. In it, Zalos starts by trying to sell his new invention, cannonballs that cause depression. He's rejected. In his anger, he fires upon Nowhere, making everyone depressed, besides Eustace because he's immune. Courage of course tries to stop him, but is stopped by Rat, Zalos' pet Take a guess. The fight ends with Rack causing him to cry like a baby. The rest of the episode has Courage trying to stop Zalos, until a happy plum, something Muriel was making, falls into where the cannonballs were made. This gives Courage an idea. He leads Zalos back to the house, where Zalos eats Muriel's plum pie, which helps cure him of his depression, and he then reverses the effects of the town. This is a pretty clear metaphor for depression. No one offers to help Zalos' depression, which causes him to spread it, until though, with the help of friends in the pie, which is obviously standard for medicine, gets him cured. Heck, Zalos' name is very clearly based on the prescription drug Zoloft. The final of those episodes is the second to last episode, Remembrance of Courage Past. May not be as heavy hitting as the last two, but it's very important to the deep emotional lore of Courage. Here we find out that all the horrific monsters Courage has seen, only one has managed to traumatize him. A veterinarian who, when Courage was only a pup, kidnapped his parents and sent them into space. Courage kept experiencing this nightmare, and in an attempt to overcome it, goes to the source, meeting the cruel veterinarian himself. Another theme of the show overall is to never trust appearances. Though usually it's something scary isn't actually. The raccoon that kidnapped Muriel just wants a mom, Bigfoot that ransacks the house is just a scared kid, the big scary serpent Carmen is just an opera singer, and the previously mentioned Kitty and Duck Brothers are all good examples. This episode is the opposite. A seemingly trustworthy person, a vet, being the most downright hateable character in the show alongside Mad Dog. The vet kidnaps dogs and sends them to space hoping they'll become super dogs, a reference to Cold War and animal testing. The vet tries to do this with Courage as well before he escapes. And when all hope is lost, Muriel comes in to affirm to us all that she's the greatest character to ever exist. Courage confronts the vet, who's basically just like,
"A fine addition to my collection."
Muriel and Eustace followed Courage here, and it's worth noting that even Eustace is disgusted in what the vet is doing. And he literally tried to kill Courage 3 episodes ago. The vet pulls in no witnesses and tries to kill Muriel and Eustace too. Courage very satisfyingly breaks out of his grasp by screaming to his Setsuko, and then kicks him into the shell he prepared for Courage. Where on the moon, he's met with all the dogs he's yeeted up into space, who prepare to beat him up and presumably kill him. Good riddance. This may not be as talked about as the other previously mentioned 3, nor is it as wrapped in subtlety like them, but for what it does greatly. It's not my favorite episode, but it reaffirmed my love for Courage, Muriel, and the show so hard. Plus having a great backstory and one of the most despicable characters on the show, who didn't even need to be a serial killer, should just be the worst. The episode The Hunchback of Nowhere is interesting because it has Courage interact with a character that represents marginalized groups. I've seen many different people interpret it many different ways, most obvious being that people who are unattractive are looked down upon. The Hunchback is denied access to shelter by everyone due to his appearances, and when Muriel lies him in, Eustace is Eustace. The Hunchback hides away in the shed. We get one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. Just Courage and Hunchback bonding over bells. The one thing that makes the Hunchback happy. They make a song and everything. I just love this episode so much. This was the part where I realized this show was something special. It's not my favorite episode, though. For that, let's finally end off the segment with the finale of the series. Perfect. After Courage fricks up various farm activities, Eustace claims he can't do anything right. Courage really takes this to heart, with his lack of perfection becoming an obsession, which is something I'm sure we're all familiar with. This leads to a teacher appearing who very rudely tries to teach Courage to be perfect. It's often ambiguous if this teacher is real or made up by Courage's mind. I like to think it's the latter. Also, Muriel and Eustace are also trying to become skilled at something. Muriel at cooking baklava, and Eustace at playing the bugle. The teacher tries to get Courage to do multiple different things, like singing a sentence perfectly, which he fricks up because he has trouble speaking, or walking perfectly, which he does by balancing books on his head and one falls off. After failing everything, the teacher tells him to sleep perfectly, and then this happens. Yeah, let's talk about this. I love this episode for something I'll talk about later. And while I do think Freaky Friday is the scariest overall episode, this is the scariest individual scene. The just long enough build-up between Courage falling asleep and revealing the creature, the music, the additional build-up between seeing the creature and it speaking, which is just long enough for you to stop screaming from his appearance, so you can then scream at the way he speaks. The echo effect, and most notably, his appearance actually making sense. There's a lot of theories on what this guy is supposed to be, but he's supposed to be a manifestation of everything Courage just experienced. He's having trouble speaking since he's cursed with the knowledge of not being perfect, and he has to live with that despite his attempts to become perfect. He also has to deal with Eustace, being Eustace, who's also going through his own problem of not being able to play the bugle. That's what the monster is supposed to be, a corrupted bugle. He eventually wakes up and is told his next task is to brush his teeth. He hasn't studied properly, aka watching the song from Lazy Town, so of course he's paranoid. That is, till a dead fish tell him that no one's perfect. Okay, that sounds stupid in so many ways, but it's my second favorite scene in the show after the Hunchback one. Usually when you get an everyone's beautiful message, it's something beautiful, not a dead fish. But like, if it's about how being perfect isn't a bad thing, it should be from an imperfect creature. Courage also learns that Muriel's baklava formula, while not made perfectly, still tastes pretty good, and Eustace's bugle, while busted up, can still play pretty well. The teacher asks to make a perfect 6, which Courage does creatively. Since this isn't exactly what Courage wants, despite Courage following the rules, she scolds him. Courage doesn't care though, he's just happy to be himself. Teacher is very accurate to real teachers though, and when a student veers even if slightly off what they exactly want, they immediately die. But Courage doesn't care. He's finally above his fears, and he, Muriel, and Eustace all live happily ever after. Also, the fish is eaten alive. Too long didn't read here. Courage is one of the smartest and honestly healthiest cartoons I've ever seen. It was never afraid to tackle darker or heavier subjects, but always does it subtly. I didn't go over every big episode because I strongly encourage, haha, you to all watch this wonderful show for yourself. It just legitimately makes me so happy, and it genuinely changed my worldview, even though I didn't realize it had an effect on me until later. Well, went over the side patterns in my Monster Inc. video. Let's do the same thing here. Again, there's 2, though I do briefly want to mention this official music video I found. In it, Muriel and Eustace are depicted as more realistic. Eustace is also far nicer, and Courage constantly misinterprets things as threats. There's a popular fan theory that Courage is a normal dog who interprets everything as scary because he never left his house. And if this is canon, this confirms that theory. But the main 2 are the 2013 short Blog of Courage and the 2021 crossover movie with Scooby-Doo. I just realized this is the same years as the Monsters Inc. stuff, 2013, 2021. That's kind of funny. Blog of Courage is fun. The characters are all what you remember them being. CGI fits well, and they have some good cartoon moments despite it being CG and not 2D. And it's decently funny. This would have been a good revival if CN picked it up. My one problem though is Eustace's voice. He's played by Wallace Shawn, a talented actor and voice actor, but he doesn't fit Eustace. Everyone else returned, and his VA was still alive, so this is just a weird choice. But still, I say give it a watch. It's pretty short. This year we got another piece of Courage media, straight out of nowhere. Crossover between Courage and Scooby-Doo, which just makes so much sense. I'll try to avoid spoilers because it's pretty new. This is just so fun, especially for someone who loves both shows. It doesn't feel like a Scooby episode that happens to take place nowhere. It feels like a genuine crossover between the two. All the old voice actors come back to reprise their roles, meaning this is Thea White's last performance, and she's still great. Though Eustace is recast again, which is understandable this time, since his VA from the show passed away. He's now done by Jeff Bergman, who you may know from voicing every modern version of a classic cartoon character. I swear he'll voice me one day. Well, mostly great, I do have one problem with it, but it's not with the film itself. So they never told John R. Dilworth, the creator of Courage, that they were making it. That just feels extremely scummy, especially since he was trying to revive the show with Fall of Courage and was rejected. Also, why was Courage brought back at all? Courage is older than both Candy and Billy and Mandy, and the continuations of both of those were rejected because kids don't know those franchises. Why is this fine? It all feels wrong to me. Despite that though, this film still stands strong as a great end to the series, so I hope that it might be the push we need to get this not-so-stupid dog a revival, or at the very least, more people interested in this phenomenal little unassuming house right in the middle of nowhere.
Things I do for love.